Hello, everyone. I'm Sheldon Baker, and welcome to the 420 Area Code. You know, cannabis comes from different venues. One such place are sovereign nations where Indian tribes have distinct advantages over state licensed groups. What are those competitive advantages? Our guests will share background about tribal cannabis and CBD after this important message.
Not all hemp oils are created equal. Let Verdant Oasis show you why. Verdant Oasis is a vertically integrated hemp-centric raw material grower, manufacturer, and supplier. We oversee every step from soil to oil. Verdant strains are genotyped and registered by government-regulated seed banks. Our operations are HACCP and GMP certified by SGS International. Verdant Oasis has the most comprehensive global safety dossier for hemp extract, setting the benchmark for FDA acceptance and NDI compliance, the gateway to the food and beverage industry. Our hemp oil ingredients are accepted and authorized by the FDA, USDA, and DEA for interstate commerce throughout the United States. In the UK and EU, our extract is authorized as a novel food. Wholesome and pure, backed by science, legally compliant, and fully integrated with a dedicated innovation center to serve your unique marketing objectives. To learn more about the Verdant difference, visit our website at www.verdantoasis.com. Verdant Oasis, the essence of hemp.
Welcome back. My guest today is Mary Jane Oatman, the Executive Director of ICANNC, and we'll find out what that means. She's also the publisher and editor of THC Magazine, which stands for Tribal Hemp and Cannabis. Mary Jane, welcome to the show. Welcome to the 420 Area Code.
Well, thank you. And hello, everybody that's listening. It's an honor and a privilege to join your show and share everything that's going on with the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, as well as the work that we do with THC Magazine, which there's a lot of updates.
Great. Well, we'll hear a little bit about it today. ICANNC, what does that mean?
So you know how it is with pretty much anywhere where you see that marketing and brand development. What we did with the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition is just, lopped off the I, kept the can in cannabis, and then the C with the coalition. We started in 2019, formally as an organization, as a 501c3. And we really wanted to capture the ICANNC 2020, with tribes in cannabis when we started out. So that was a part of our, I guess you could say, our media shtick when we first started out, to get people aware of what we were doing with the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition. And we planned to, keep it. ICANNC is the short version of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition.
It's almost an acronym versus just letters, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So cannabis sovereignty for Indian tribes, it's somewhat unknown. Yes?
Well, it definitely is. Anytime that we talk about federal prohibition and the history of how this very sacred, powerful medicine has been eliminated from the access and conscience of Americans, is that none of that history or prehistory includes the fact that Indigenous communities already had a presence of cordage and fiber in economy, as well as plant medicines. And so much so that the Jefferson Peace Medal includes the peace pipe on it as an attempt to further persuade the indigenous peoples out west to negotiate the treaties and the land negotiations. So it almost feels like it's quite purposeful.
Hmm. Are there many opportunities at various levels for cannabis tribes to get involved in cannabis and CBD?
Oh, most definitely. We have the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, probably set to be one of the leading hempcrete producers in the nation. They have a vast amount of agricultural lands and have already dug in deep on the fiber side, on the fiber side of the industry. And so we have, tribes that maybe we're taking the baby steps towards, an economy on fiber, but we have tribes that are fully vertically integrated with their own testing facilities. And those are kind of like the beacon tribes of, for other tribes that are operating in a place of fear and moving forward with even having the conversation about changing their law and order code just to decriminalize for housing. I mean, in some tribal communities, people are still getting evicted from housing, from their homes over cannabis, losing their jobs over cannabis. And then, some tribes are, already making very, lucrative returns and able to give back to community programs with their shares.
Are there tribes in all 50 states that are part of the cannabis and CBD community?
Not, I guess, not in a free and open market necessarily. I mean, I'm from Idaho. I'm a member of the Nez Perce tribe, and my tribe was the first tribe in Idaho to get approved by the USDA to cultivate hemp under the Farm Bill. But we are not operational yet. We are still in the strategic planning mode of, fiber versus flower. So I would say the short answer to that is no, because a lot of tribes are still, even with the Cole Wilkinson memorandum and some of that guidance, there were tribes still afraid to move forward. And since, that was rescinded under the Trump administration, tribes have experienced federal raids for small-scale cultivation. Tribal communities under the Biden administration are still experiencing raids by the federal government. Just in November, the Piquerías Pueblo had a raid of a medical cultivation of only 9 plants. So that sends the message to other tribes that there's no home base on an Indian reservation for cultivating cannabis.
And I think you really kind of touched on it. You talked about the Trump administration. So we're talking about a conservative political situation, and certainly where you are in Idaho, I think you have a conservative government that's really going to frown upon what you folks do.
Oh, most definitely. That's why we're really working to unify tribes that are in cannabis to issue a letter and a petition to the United States Department of Justice and Attorney General Merrick Garland to urge him to either reissue the Cole Wilkinson memorandum or authorize his own memorandum that threads in the Biden administration's priorities, which included upholding the federal trust responsibility. It's really sad that one of those federal raids has happened since the Biden administration has amplified the important message of protecting tribes, tribal economies and communities and building nations. And then, you turn around and have a federal raid in a state where it's medically legal, on a property where the family had not only a tribal medical permit, but a state medical permit as well. And the tribal, the governor of that pueblo has been very outspoken that they authorize, their community to be able to cultivate their own medicine.
So based on what you're saying is that virtually all the cannabis laws that are out there for everyone, for the general population, also applies to the tribal community.
Oh, definitely. There's no tribes that are, I shouldn't say none. In California, because tribes were left out of opportunities to compact with the state, there are tribes in California that are running what you would consider essentially, tribal sovereignty in cannabis. There's another tribe that's doing it as well. That's really interesting. I think that this is kind of one to watch a little bit more, because in a state where you have contentious state-tribal relations and you have a tribe moving forward, more of an adversarial position with the state, and then the feds don't intervene and they open up large-scale cannabis enterprises, you're wondering, like, how can that tribe do it, but this tribe can't? And you realize at the end of the day that, the political nature of everything is always an issue. The Bay Mills Indian community in Michigan, they're operating their cannabis dispensary and getting ready to open up a second one with a huge attraction for tourism on their reservation. And they're not compacted with the state of Michigan. Ironically, and this is where I think all of the tribes should really be trying to figure out what this formula is. Their tribal chairman that they executed this entire business plan under is now the Assistant Secretary of the United States Department of Interior. He's just one person under Deb Haaland at Interior. And his community has experienced 0 raids.
Yeah. So what got you involved in the cannabis CBD portion of tribal business?
Well, on the policy side, I was an appointee under the Obama administration for the National Advisory Council on Indian Education. And during that same time that we're, moving full steam ahead on education reform and priorities, the nation was teeing up the Farm Bill, and tribes were left out of the 2014 version. And so on the policy side of it, that's when the pendulum started to shift with my professional work. However, I've been a cannabis consumer since in utero. My mother used cannabis full term during her pregnancy. My grandmother went to federal prison for cultivating cannabis on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation. And then in addition to that, I come from a people that have a long oral history of healing with plant medicines, including cannabis, prior to European invasion on our homelands. And so that's why I think when I mentioned earlier that it seems quite purposeful, is that the narrative of cannabis on this continent only starts with European settlement. I think we got something a little bit wrong going on there. If the cultural pattern and traditions show that we have had a very long-standing relationship as cordage economies from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Sounds like it's quite a challenging situation that you face and that the tribes have to face and have to deal with.
It definitely is. At the end of the day, the competition over resources, land and water will undoubtedly either create more opportunity for tribes or create more obstacles and challenges for them. And so that's why at the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, we work to position tribes to work together, synthesize what those priorities that they can agree on are, and move forward with those in a unified voice.
Fantastic. We had the opportunity to meet late last year at a cannabis industry cannabis trade show, and delightful meeting you. Did you find that helpful in making contacts and what you want to do in furthering your work?
Oh, definitely. It helped me on the personal side in being able to network with professionals that can help grow and build the business side of what I do with the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition. I mean, one of them, she's an amazing coach. And I realized that I kind of did need a coach in my life, just a professional to consult with 1 hour a month to just make sure that things are on track and moving forward, and to just kind of shift and refocus because, when you take on a lot and you do a lot, sometimes you want to just think about the deficits or the negative things, the what you're not getting done or what you haven't accomplished, to just kind of coach you into operating from a strengths-based place. But on the tribal side, most definitely, I got to meet other tribal cannabis consultants that had gathered to learn. And that's just where it is. It's all about education and advocacy. So what I was doing prior is not really any different. People are captive and want to hear the information, most definitely. So, professionally and personally, the NCIA San Francisco Business Summit was a success.
Yes, a really a great place to network and and meet people. Absolutely. That's what trade shows are all about, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Well, since the NCIA has started the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, I have been able to collaborate with Mike Lumoto and their offices, Morgan Fox, who just recently left NCIA to go over to work at Normal. Amy Rose, they've got a phenomenal, staff that have, some big vision and are really meaningful about inclusivity.
Fantastic. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about THC Magazine and how that got started and how that's working for you. So everybody out there, stick around, come on back, and we'll talk more with Mary Jane Oatman. Don't go away.
Not all hemp oils are created equal. Let Verdant Oasis show you why. Verdant Oasis is a vertically integrated hemp-centric raw material grower, manufacturer, and supplier. We oversee every step from soil to oil. Verdant strains are genotyped and registered by government-regulated seed banks. Our operations are HACCP and GMP certified by SGS International. Verdant Oasis has the most comprehensive global safety dossier for hemp extract, setting the benchmark for FDA acceptance and NDI compliance, the gateway to the food and beverage industry. Our hemp oil ingredients are accepted and authorized by the FDA, USDA, and DEA for interstate commerce throughout the United States. In the UK and EU, our extract is authorized as a novel food. Wholesome and pure, backed by science, legally compliant, and fully integrated with a dedicated innovation center to serve your unique marketing objectives. To learn more about the Verdant difference, visit our website at www.verdantoasis.com. Verdant Oasis, the essence of hemp.
We're back on the 420 area code, and my guest today is Mary Jane Oatman. And Mary Jane is executive director. You have a lot of titles. You're executive director of the ICANNC. You are a publisher and editor of the THC Magazine. You wear a lot of hats, including the one you're wearing today. And so, I saw the magazine. I happened to be in the press room at the show in San Francisco last year, saw the magazine, and then kind of bumped into you later on, maybe the next day. And tell us about the magazine, how long you've been publishing, how that got started, and the great success you've had with it.
Well, the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition is definitely about the protection of tribal sovereignty and elevating what's happening with tribes in hemp and cannabis. And the education and advocacy component of our organization is THC Magazine. Tribal Hemp and Cannabis Magazine is the nation's first and only that's dedicated exclusively to what tribes are doing in the industry. And it was an original part of the plan and the fabric of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition based on my past work that I've done in nonprofits. So I was the youngest ever president of the National Indian Education Association, and I served in that capacity while we executed the White House executive order on American Indian and Alaska Native education. And getting educational materials into rural communities, rural Indigenous communities, is really critical to move forward with certain areas of policies. And Tribal Hemp and Cannabis Magazine is, about the preservation of what's happening now, because it's historic. I mean, just on a global scale, what's happening right now is just truly historic. But I was well aware that this is like me coming in, as the granddaughter of somebody who was federally incarcerated. I knew that there were so many other stories like that, or there were warriors on the front line like Winona LaDuke, that has been an ambassador of plant medicine. Alex White Plume, who I first heard about when I was a high school student and what his family was doing. And so, when I started the concept and just some of the early planning stages, it was with that goal of like, I got all of these celebrity crushes on all these tribal, I guess you could say, activists, plant activists. And so I thought, well, this is going to be a great way to interview them and share their stories. So THC Magazine came up with our first issue, formulated in November of 2019 was when we started working on it, and launched our first 10,000 copies in February of 2020. And we took our launch party to the National Congress of American Indians Executive Winter Council. And while we were there, we were like, we're going to host it and we're going to do this big. So we worked in collaboration with a nonprofit called King Weedy Collective in Washington, D.C. And we were able to get their mansion as a space to host the nation's first tribal cannabis mixer, and invited all of the elected leaders there. And some of them showed up. It was really neat to be in that space where it was not just a booze-fueled environment, but more of a social mixer around cannabis. And we had one confirmed guest that said that they were not going to be able to make it, which just broke my heart. And that was then Congresswoman Deb Haaland. She had written a written contribution for the first issue of the magazine and was all on board with adult use legalization. It had been part of the work that she'd done in Congress. But she did one thing better. If you ever, you get a chance, check out the www.Indigenous Cannabis Coalition website. We have a wonderful video from former Congresswoman, now Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, speaking to tribes about how important it is for them to decide for themselves, what the protection of tribal sovereignty looks like in cannabis. But she is definitely pro-adult, and she's adult use legalization. That was back when those terms were thrown around quite a bit. The vernacular in the industry changes as we move along, but she's definitely about safe, quality access.
Have you had a chance to sit down with her and talk about and voice your concerns? Of course, I'm certain she's aware of a lot of those concerns, if not all of them. But have you had a chance to actually sit down with her, or at least do a virtual with her?
I have not. I submitted a formal request for an interview, and it was declined, sadly. Maybe it was also the timing of what was going on, but we have some other channels to be able to to drive those issues forward. And one of the things that remains constant is when we submitted our first case of magazines to her New Mexico as well as her Washington D.C. offices. So she distributes THC Magazine as education and advocacy from her former offices. She said that they were gone within the first couple of weeks, and her staffers were calling to reorder more cases of that magazine publication. So I never would, called quicker than the dispensaries. I had never had a dispensary run out as quick as a congressional office ran out of such a unique publication. And that's also where we're at is, we lie in print almost exclusively with digital download. So we're really looking at, finding creative resources so that we can have more of an immersive digital experience. We're doing that, trying to integrate that into the print publication. And that's why we also know that it's really, really important to be consistent and to just keep going. Like the pandemic was questionable. And even now with the supply chain issues that we experience, I was contacted last month by one of where I get the magazine printed saying, we are eliminating our gloss magazine print. So you're going to have to find a new home. So I never know what's going to be thrown at me, but just like, my ancestors, very resilient to keep driving forward.
Yes. These days, it's always something. We only have a few minutes, but I really want to get into, you recently dedicated an edition of your publication to Indigenous children whose remains were discovered in unmarked graves at a former Indian school. Tell us about this sad discovery and how you got involved. We only have a few minutes, but I'd like to share some of your story.
My grandmother, who is on the cover of the very first issue of THC Magazine that I spoke of earlier, going to federal prison over cannabis, She is a survivor of a residential boarding school. She was a product of alcoholism in a single family home where she had no choice. Her and her siblings, were sent to a boarding school. And the boarding school experiences in the lower 48, while they may not have the same public trauma that was unveiled, we do still have a lot of those experiences. I grew up of hearing a lot of my elders' experiences of those boarding school traumas. I have an aunt that was sent to a boarding school and impregnated by a staff member and had a miscarriage in the toilet at the residential school. And this is family of mine that I didn't hear about these stories until I was an adult. And it just really, I guess for me, I realized that THC Magazine has the capacity to propel issues that are tied to our land and our people's struggles to this day. And we see that kind of come full circle in cannabis as we strive to heal ourselves and heal our communities with plant medicine. And we still have so much interference from government just trying to live our lives.
Yeah. So what made you, get behind that program of the missing children?
So on the fourth issue of THC Magazine, we actually featured the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women campaign. And so when Indigenous women in hemp and cannabis, so every issue kind of has a cover theme. It's not a theme that drives throughout the entirety of the magazine, but the covers of any magazine really have an opportunity to propel certain messages. And, for us, when we were working on that specific issue, we did not have a specific cover secured as we were designing the magazine. And then it just went out all across the press. And every time we would read a new article, the number was steadily increasing. So that was one thing that made it a challenge, was we were just getting ready to go to print. And then there was another news release that the count rose in the number of unmarked graves that were found, because our original cover, we had 712.
Wow. Sad, very, very sad. We have just about a minute. Our viewers, if our viewers want to get a hold of you, they want a copy of the magazine, what's the best way to do that?
Well, we can be found at every single tribally owned and operated dispensary across the nation. If you are a dispensary owner and you want to have THC Magazine at your location to share the education and the love from Tribal Hemp and Cannabis communities, look for us on the website, indigenouscannabiscoalition.com. That's how you get all your free downloads. That's how you find out how to advertise with THC Magazine. If you feel so compelled on sponsoring and supporting the work that we do, it's all on our website, indigenouscannabiscoalition.com.
Fantastic. Mary Jane Oatman, thank you for joining me today. I hope to see you at another trade show down the line. Take care of yourself. Good luck. And we'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for joining us on the 420 area code.
Not all hemp oils are created equal. Let Verdant Oasis show you why. Verdant Oasis is a vertically integrated hemp-centric raw material grower, manufacturer, and supplier. We oversee every step from soil to oil. Verdant strains are genotyped and registered by government-regulated seed banks. Our operations are HACCP and GMP certified by SGS International. Verdant Oasis has the most comprehensive global safety dossier for hemp extract, setting the benchmark for FDA acceptance and NDI compliance, the gateway to the food and beverage industry. Our hemp oil ingredients are accepted and authorized by the FDA, USDA, and DEA for interstate commerce throughout the United States. In the UK and EU, our extract is authorized as a novel food. Wholesome and pure, backed by science, legally compliant, and fully integrated with a dedicated innovation center to serve your unique marketing objectives. To learn more about the Verdant difference, visit our website at www.verdant.com. verdentoasis.com. Verdent Oasis, the essence of hemp.